Syracuse football is projected to face some really strong quarterbacks in 2025, and it's one of the reasons why making a bowl for Syracuse is not a guarantee. Still think they will make a bowl, but it's not a guarantee because of the quarterbacks they are facing.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. In a Locked On Syracuse, I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your favorite audio platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are previewing Syracuse football's quarterbacks that they will be facing in 2025, or at least projected to face in 2025. We'll go over later on in the podcast where the Orange could have the matchup edge at the game's most important position. So stick with me later on here on Locked On Syracuse. We're going to go over some of the quarterbacks that Syracuse will face in its non-conference slate in 2025. We're going to start this podcast, though, talking about the top quarterbacks that the Orange are projected to face in the ACC this upcoming season. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. Now, before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. In my opinion, Syracuse is going to face tougher quarterbacks in 2025 than they did in 2024. And in 2024, they faced some pretty good ones, right? Obviously, Cam Ward, who ended up being the number one pick in the NFL draft. They played Haynes King at Georgia Tech early in the season, right? So they faced some really good quarterbacks. And by the way, with Haynes King, they are going to face him again in 2025, right? So they did face some really good quarterbacks in 2024. But in terms of sheer volume, 2025 looks like it's going to be a tougher year, at least on paper. Of course, injuries can happen, underperformance can happen. So these are just projections as of right now. Things can always change as we get into the regular season, right? So just bear with me on that. Don't hold me to this podcast, which I'm recording on June 29th in the middle of October when talking about these quarterbacks if there's some sort of injury or underperformance, okay? This is just a projection. Looks like it's going to be pretty tough on paper. Now, before we start, I should mention that I am recording this podcast on Sunday, June 29th. You are watching or listening to this on Monday, maybe even Tuesday. This is being released on Monday. But the reason why I'm recording this in advance is because I can't record on Monday. I will not be available. So if there's some big breaking news between now and during the day on Monday, you'll get that reaction podcast on Tuesday, although I don't necessarily expect that we'll get huge, big breaking news between now and Tuesday. But I just wanted to let you all know that. Now let's get into the ACC quarterbacks that Syracuse will face in 2025. Now let's get to the conference matchups, okay? You got at Clemson, Duke, at SMU, Pitt, at Georgia Tech, North Carolina, at Miami, Boston College. That is in order in which they will play those teams. The projected quarterbacks, all right? You got Clemson, Cade Klubnik, Duke, Darian Mensah, SMU, Kevin Jennings, Pitt, Eli Holstein, Georgia Tech, Haynes King. North Carolina, it's a big quarterback competition there between Max Johnson, Gio Lopez, and Bryce Baker. Miami, you got Carson Beck. And Boston College, you got Grayson James. I do wish it was Thomas Castellanos because he stinks and he's running his mouth at Florida State, and he is due for a really, really bad season there. But I'm only going to talk about 5 of these quarterbacks because we got 8 of them here and we don't have all day here on this podcast. But for the most part, top to bottom, these are some really high quality quarterbacks that Syracuse is facing. But the toughest one, the toughest quarterback that Syracuse is projected to face, at least for right now, is Cade Klubnik. And feel free to agree or disagree with me right now in the comments section below. I think Cade Klubnik is the toughest quarterback that Syracuse will face in the ACC this upcoming season. And in general, actually, even if you include the non-conference quarterbacks as well, Cade Klubnik is the best quarterback that Syracuse is scheduled to face. An upset over Clemson on the road is going to be really difficult. I'm just going to tell you all right now how it is. It's going to be really hard for Syracuse to go into Clemson and actually win that game. Now, funny enough, Syracuse does have a history of going into Clemson and actually keeping it very close. They did it a couple of years ago, actually when Cade Klubnik entered the game in the third quarter. Remember that one? Syracuse should have won that game. A few years before that, Syracuse nearly knocked off Trevor Lawrence over there. So Syracuse has a history of kind of keeping it close in Clemson. But regardless, Cade Klubnik, I doubted him at the start of 2024, but he was terrific in 2024. His first full year starting was 2023. 13 games, 64% completion rate, 2,800 yards, 19 touchdowns, 9 picks. Didn't do much rushing either. Those aren't necessarily bad numbers in 2023 for Klubnik. But at Clemson, those are game manager numbers. With the amount of talent that they produce year in and year out, if your quarterback is giving you game managing numbers at Clemson, then you really probably don't have a good quarterback. But in 2024, he shut me up and he shut up a lot of critics out there with his play. 14 games, 63% completion again, 3,600 passing yards, 36 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So that's a touchdown interception ratio of 6-1 for Cade Klubnik last season. Also, he can scramble. He's a threat with his legs. Over 450 rushing yards last season and 7 rushing touchdowns. And if all goes according to plan, Cade Klubnik is going to be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. With Clemson, usually, in fact, over the past 15 years, they have had more talent, top to bottom, than Syracuse football. It's just, I'm sorry, I'm a Syracuse fan. I'm a Syracuse alum. I would love for Syracuse to always beat Clemson, all that fun stuff. They have beat them before. Remember that big upset? With Dino Babers, I should say. It wasn't with Fran Brown or anything, but that did happen. But regardless, Clemson has more talent. They are pretty much better at every single position group than Syracuse. But the way where Syracuse could have a chance of an upset is if Clemson's quarterback is making mistakes. Remember DJ a few years ago when Syracuse went to Clemson, he did not play well. He didn't. And it gave Syracuse a chance. The year before that, DJ didn't play well when he came to the Dome. And it gave Syracuse a chance at an upset. But if Clemson's quarterback is on his game, I don't see how Syracuse has any sort of chance at winning unless they could somehow manage a 51-45 type win. And with Cade Klubnik, the odds of catching him on an off day appears unlikely as opposed to what I would have said last season, which is, hey, maybe you could catch him on an off day. Maybe he's not playing well, and all of a sudden you have a chance. But with Clemson, with Cade Klubnik, sorry, that is such a tongue twister. I apologize. It's very hard to envision Syracuse winning that game. But who else is Syracuse facing in the ACC? You got Darian Mensah over at Duke, a Tulane transfer with 3 years of eligibility remaining. So he has a potential to be a nightmare against Syracuse for years to come. And in the ACC, Duke opened the vault for him in the transfer portal this offseason. And he's coming off a strong year at Tulane. Played 13 games, 66% completions, really high, 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Do not underestimate the Duke Blue Devils in the ACC. They are one of the sneaky dark horses in the conference this upcoming season. If you tell me right now that Duke is going to be in the ACC title game, I would not be surprised. Darian Mensah is a big part of that. Georgia Tech, you got Haynes King, last year of eligibility. Syracuse has seen Haynes King before, both in 2023 and in 2024. And Syracuse is 1-1 against him. In fact, of the 5 quarterbacks that I am mentioning here, he's the only one that Syracuse faced last season. To me, Haynes King, I want to say this without actually calling him this. When I watch him play, and maybe you feel the same way or maybe you feel differently, I think of him as the college version of Josh Allen with the Buffalo Bills. I'm not saying Haynes King is as good as Josh Allen. I'm not saying Haynes King is going to be a first-round pick or anything like that. He's certainly talented, but he's a big quarterback, 6'3", 215 pounds. And even then, he plays bigger than what he is listed at because he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the country. He's a very mobile guy, and also he improved his completion percentage a year ago at 73%. Dark horse player to win the Heisman. I'm not going to pick him to win the Heisman Trophy, but he is definitely a dark horse because if he has a big year, he could combine for 40 touchdowns and 4,000 yards. And if you have 4,000 total yards and 40 touchdowns, you might find yourself in New York City at the end of the season. And so in order for Syracuse to beat a team like Georgia Tech and Haynes King, they're really going to have to hold the edges, keep Haynes King in the pocket, and hope that he makes a couple of mistakes over the middle of the field or something like that. You got Kevin Jennings with 2 more years of eligibility as well over at SMU. He didn't begin the 2024 season as the starting quarterback there. It was actually Preston Stone, who's at Northwestern. But when Jennings took over as the full-time starter, he did quite well, and he was a big reason why SMU went to the college football playoff last season. He's also another dual-threat guy. If you're not careful, he had 100 rushing yards against Louisville last season. So those are, I think, the 4 best quarterbacks that Syracuse will face in the ACC. You got Cade Klubnik over at Clemson, Darian Mensah over at Duke, you got Georgia Tech's Haynes King, and you got Kevin Jennings at SMU. But then there's a big question mark, and it's the final quarterback we'll talk about here in this segment from the ACC, okay? Carson Beck over at Miami. He is fascinating. He could have a Kyle McCord type year. And by that, I mean, here's the deal with Carson Beck. He had a really strong 2023 at Georgia, and it led a lot of people to believe that he'd be the number 1 pick after the 2024 season in the NFL draft. He would leave college, he would go directly to the NFL, be the number 1 pick like Cam Ward was, and go on to have a great NFL career. But that's not exactly what happened. Carson Beck, at least statistically, he got worse in 2024 compared to 2023, and he left the Georgia program. He transferred. And it's one of those scenarios to me where I still think Carson Beck is really good. In fact, I think Carson Beck is the second best quarterback in the ACC because even though he might not have lived up to expectations as his number 1 pick, it's not like he's bad or anything. He's still really good. It's kind of like, again, Kyle McCord at Ohio State. Yeah, he didn't live up to the guys before him, but he was still really good at Ohio State. The issue was that they didn't really necessarily see it that way because they're used to something even better than what Kyle McCord gave them. The issue, though, with Carson Beck is that he's coming off elbow surgery on his throwing elbow. So health is the big concern with Carson Beck. Now, by the time Syracuse faces Miami, which is the back half of the regular season, we'll know a lot more about Carson Beck and his elbow. But I just want to mention him because I think he's the second best quarterback that Syracuse will face all year if he's healthy. But I don't know if he's going to be healthy. And if he's not healthy, well, that's not going to be good for Miami. It would be good for Syracuse, though. What are your thoughts? Where do you put a healthy Carson Beck in the ACC quarterback rankings for next season as far as who Syracuse is going to play? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments section below, as well as who you think the toughest quarterback Syracuse is going to face this upcoming season. We talked about the ACC quarterbacks. Coming up, we'll discuss the non-conference quarterbacks. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following along the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? Say you're going to a baseball game with some of your best friends, right? And baseball games are always really fun, especially in the beginning of the game, sitting down in your seat. Maybe you got like a hot dog in your hands, right? Or like a hamburger, chicken tenders. You're feeling good, right? But baseball, it can kind of get to be a slog as you get to the middle part of the game. Once you get to the middle innings, 4, 5, 6, and then the pitching changes start happening, all of a sudden it gets a little bit boring. But that's where FanDuel can come in for you. And guess what? If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's episode, we are talking about the quarterbacks that Syracuse will face in 2025. And we began the show talking about the ACC quarterbacks the Orange are set to face. Now, let's talk about the non-conference quarterbacks. And let's get to the matchups for Syracuse in the non-conference slate for 2025. You got, in order, Tennessee, neutral site game in Atlanta. That is week 1. UConn at home week 2, Colgate at home week 3, and then second last game of the regular season, Syracuse travels to South Bend, Indiana to take on Notre Dame. The projected starting quarterbacks that Syracuse will face: Tennessee, Joey Aguilar; UConn, Joe Fagnano or Nick Evers; Colgate, they got Jake Sterney; and Notre Dame, C.J. Carr. Now, the two big ones that Syracuse has to worry about in its non-conference slate are undoubtedly the ones for Tennessee and Notre Dame. Syracuse is going to beat Colgate. They're an FCS opponent, barring a catastrophe of epic proportions. I don't believe Syracuse has ever lost to an FCS opponent in their history. Knock on wood. Right? So Colgate shouldn't have to worry too much, right? Syracuse should most likely, again, I said this on the previous podcast, they should beat UConn. They should. But if they're not careful, things can get interesting, especially because UConn is coming off their best season since 2007. And if UConn plays the same way in 2025 and Syracuse takes their foot off the gas, or they don't get good quarterback play in that one, maybe there's a potential for a home upset, but still, Syracuse should enter that game as probably a 10-point favorite at minimum, right? So they should be able to beat UConn. Who's the toughest quarterback that Syracuse is going to face in its non-conference slate? I'd love to hear your thoughts right now in the comment section below before we get to it, because I'll be honest with you, I got no idea who the toughest one is. We'll go in order here. We'll go to Tennessee, Joey Aguilar, and then we'll go to Notre Dame with C.J. Carr. Okay, so Joey Aguilar, he is an Appalachian State transfer from this offseason. He was not supposed to be Tennessee's starting quarterback. That was supposed to be Nico Imaliava. But then there was the whole spring fiasco with Imaliava wanting more money to remain at Tennessee. Tennessee and Nico decide to part ways. Now Tennessee is stuck. They don't have a quarterback. So they go out in the portal and they go and get Joey Aguilar from Appalachian State. Actually, before they got Joey Aguilar, if I have my timing correctly, and regardless, this remains true, there were reports out there that were linking Tennessee with Steve Angeli before Steve Angeli decided to commit to Syracuse. Fun fact. But Aguilar is a very interesting quarterback that we're about to preview here, because he had an awesome 2023 season. Played in 14 games, 64% completion percentage. That's pretty good. 3,700 yards, 33 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. That is a fantastic year for Joey Aguilar. But in 2024, he regressed significantly. He played 11 games, a 56% completion rate. So that's down 8 percentage points. 64% to 56%, 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. And I was trying to figure out, why did Joey Aguilar regress from 2023 and 2024? And I'll admit, I didn't get too deep into like what the offensive line was. I know that they had a different starting running back in 2024 compared to 2023. But you would figure the two biggest reasons maybe for whether a quarterback is going to get better or get worse is, was there a change to the coaching staff? Was there a change at the wide receiver position? All those factors could influence how a quarterback is going to play. And when you look at Joey Aguilar, his top 3 receivers were the same in 2024 as they were in 2023. And he also had the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach in 2023 and 2024. So he had the same receivers and the same coaching staff from one season to the next. That's not a good sign for Joey Aguilar. It's not. It doesn't mean that he can't rebound and have an awesome year at Tennessee, but that's not a good sign, right? Usually if there's some sort of quarterback regression, you could say, oh, well, look, that school changed offensive coordinators. They changed systems. Or look, that guy at Appalachian State, he was throwing to these amazing receivers, but it's Appalachian State. So, of course, they had amazing years, and then they left, whether it's the portal or going to the NFL draft. Neither happened. He had the same top receivers. He had the same coaches, and yet he got significantly worse. Not a good sign. And Syracuse, this is why, even though I'm going to pick Tennessee, I'm going to pick Tennessee to beat Syracuse in week 1. I don't see that opinion changing, to be honest with you. I know we still got little over 2 months until that game. I'm going to pick Tennessee from now until for good. And if Syracuse wins, fantastic. I'm a Syracuse fan. I'm a Syracuse alum. But again, I try to remain as objective as I possibly can. That being said, I give Syracuse a puncher's chance here. I don't know how good Joey Aguilar is going to be at Tennessee. It's not like he lit the world on fire when he was at Appalachian State last season. Maybe he'll be better because he's going to be playing with better coaches and better receivers, better offensive line, running backs, all that fun stuff over at Tennessee. But still, talent is talent. Does he have it or not? I'm not so sure. We'll find out, I guess, in week 1 when he plays Syracuse. And also, he makes a lot of mistakes. Even in his good year, he threw 10 interceptions, 24 interceptions over the past 2 seasons. Kind of what I said about Clemson with Cade Klubnik in terms of trying to pull off an upset here, right? Syracuse, top to bottom, talent-wise, is not going to be able to match up with Tennessee. Their best path to an upset is hoping that their quarterback simply doesn't have it. Because if their quarterback doesn't have it, makes a couple of mistakes, well, you give Syracuse extra possessions, that's how you can spark an upset. Well, I said with Clemson, that's unlikely with Cade Klubnik. With Tennessee, it could happen. I think it would be more likely than Clemson. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. What upset do you think is more likely based on quarterback play? You think it's Clemson or do you think it's Tennessee? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. But that's one of the quarterbacks that Syracuse is facing in its non-conference slate. Then you got Notre Dame. You got CJ Carr, who's got 4 more years of eligibility remaining because he's about to enter his first full season as a starting quarterback in college football. So he doesn't have a lot of experience, but to me, that doesn't matter because Syracuse isn't going to face CJ Carr until the second last game of the regular season. Barring injury or underperformance, CJ Carr would have already started 10 games for Notre Dame before he plays Syracuse. So I'm not worried about the fact that, he doesn't have experience. I'm just saying that we don't know how good he is because he hasn't played yet. We'll have a better idea once we get into Syracuse and Notre Dame preview. That's going to be in November. But should be noted that CJ Carr this offseason, he beat out Steve Angeli for the starting quarterback job at Notre Dame. And obviously, Steve Angeli decides to enter the portal afterwards and go to Syracuse. Carr, he was also a high-end 4-star recruit in the 2024 recruiting cycle. And even if CJ Carr is not that good or has a bad day against Syracuse, I still think Notre Dame is going to win. I don't really think it's going to matter much because they have an elite running game, elite offensive line, elite defense. I think it's going to be very difficult for Syracuse to get any sort of offense going against Notre Dame. And to stop that run game with Jeremiah Love, who could very well win the Heisman Trophy this upcoming season, I don't see how Syracuse is going to upset Notre Dame unless they have a complete team stinker in that one, which they can do. I mean, they've done it before. They did it against Northern Illinois last year where they had a team stinker. But other than that, I don't see it. Whether or not they get good quarterback play, to me, it doesn't really matter. But those are the quarterbacks that Syracuse is facing in its non-conference slate. And which one do you think is tougher? Obviously, the ACC, there's more. There's 8 quarterbacks that they'll face. But take the top 2 from the ACC, the top 2 from the non-conference. Which group do you think is better? I would say Cade Klubnik and who's the second one? Maybe Kevin Jennings or Darian Mensah or Haynes King. Regardless of who you pick as the second best quarterback in the ACC behind Cade Klubnik that Syracuse is going to face, I think that duo is stronger than the top end of Syracuse's non-con, which is, as of right now, CJ Carr and Joey Aguilar. But I'd love to hear your take in the comments section below. Now, coming up, Which games could Syracuse have the quarterback edge? Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Where will Syracuse football have the QB matchup edge in 2025? I'd love to hear your take on it in the comments section below. And let's get right into it. Obviously, having the quarterback edge is very, very important in the sport of football in general. It doesn't guarantee that your team is going to win simply because you have the better quarterback, but more often than not, the team that has the better quarterback is going to win the football game. And we don't necessarily know who Syracuse's starting quarterback is going to be, but we can try to project how good or how bad, I guess, they're going to be for this upcoming season. So whether or not it's Steve Angeli or Ricky Collins, this is my prediction as to the games where Syracuse should have the QB edge, the games where it's kind of up in the air, and the games where it's hard to see Syracuse having the quarterback edge. Here's where they should have it. It's in 3 games. UConn, Joe Fagnano, or Nick Evers. Syracuse's starting quarterback should be better than UConn's starting quarterback. Same thing with Colgate. Jake Sterney, with all due respect, again, Syracuse should have a better quarterback than the starting quarterback for Colgate. And finally, you got Boston College and Grayson James. Probably will be better than Thomas Castellanos, but still, Syracuse should have a better quarterback than Grayson James, barring Grayson James having some terrific season that he hasn't yet had in college football. So 3 games, I see Syracuse definitively having the better quarterback in. Then you got 4 more games where I think it's up in the air. You got Tennessee, Joey Aguilar. Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein. He had a pretty nice season last year. Let's see how he develops, though. North Carolina, we just don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be. And Miami. I think we'll have a good idea Carson Beck's health by the time that Syracuse faces Carson Beck, but it's late June at the time of this recording. I have no idea how his health is going to be this upcoming season. So if it's a healthy Carson Beck, then he moves into the next category, which is hard to see Syracuse having the quarterback edge. But if he's not healthy, or it's a different quarterback at Miami, it's probably going to remain here, which is just up in the air. I don't know if Syracuse is going to have a better quarterback or not. And then, hard to see it. These are quarterbacks that I think right now it's hard to sit here and say that I think Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins are going to be better than these quarterbacks. Maybe they can be as good as them. Maybe they can play it to a quarterback matchup draw. I'll take that. But better, it's hard to see it. That's what the point of the category is. Yeah, Clemson, Cade, Klubnik. One day I'm going to get that right. I'm not going to stutter over my words with that. One day. Clemson, Cade, Klubnik. I got it. Duke, Darian Mensah. SMU, Kevin Jennings. Georgia Tech, Haynes King. And I'm going to put CJ Carr with Notre Dame here too, because keep in mind that he beat out Steve Angeli this offseason. That means, in theory, he should be a better quarterback than Steve Angeli. So how does Syracuse make a bowl and possibly do better based on the quarterbacks that they are facing this upcoming season? If Syracuse gets quarterback play on the level of the final 5 guys, or at least somewhere in that ballpark of a Klubnik, a Mensah, a Jennings, a King, a CJ Carr, they should make a bowl. I wouldn't say easily, but they should be able to make a bowl if they get strong quarterback play. Maybe not on the level of a Kyle McCord, but just, good, capable starting quarterback play. Because then you got to figure that Syracuse, they can hold serve at home and maybe pull off an upset or 2 on the road for this upcoming year. The good news for Syracuse's quarterbacks is that we have already done a season preview of the wide receivers here on this podcast. And in my opinion, the wide receivers is the strongest position group on the team this upcoming season. So the quarterback for Syracuse, whether it's Angeli or it's Ricky Collins, they should have weapons. They should not be alone and trying to carry Syracuse in these games. But where do you think Syracuse could have the quarterback edge? Comment in the comments section below. And overall, there's a reason why I'm picking Syracuse to go anywhere between 6-6 and or there's a reason why I think Syracuse is going either 6-6 or 7-5. I think their low end is 4 wins. Their high end is 9 wins based on the teams and the quarterbacks that they are facing. Now, as far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future, tomorrow, it feels like the perfect follow-up podcast to this. We are going to do a Syracuse QB position preview podcast, okay? That's what's coming up tomorrow, so on Tuesday. Beyond that, hopefully we will be able to get on a recruiting analyst to talk some football, whether it's Mike McAllister and or Brian Smith, because this could be a pretty big week for Syracuse football recruiting. CJ Hester is announcing his commitment soon. You got Calvin Russell on July 5th, right? Julius Miles also on July 5th. Plenty more to talk about with Syracuse football recruiting in this next week or so. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape, and you can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I'll see you all again soon.